Okay, so here we are part of the way through turn 9 in Italia, first scenario. Right, the Celts opened up by raiding Venice and Verona, while grabbing Verona, and they picked up some points of that, 6 points, I'm sorry, I don't want to zoom in. 6 points for grabbing the city and whatever they killed along with it, for pillaging the city, really. And then the Etruscans went, and they broke, everybody broke their allegiance. The Celts, the Etruscans, the Samnites. The Romans have no one allied with them anymore. The Etruscans broke theirs and expanded heavily, making attacks to grab cities, just grabbing all the territory that's valuable to them. This is bad for Rome, but Blue is trying to get themselves somewhere into the game, basically. And then the Samnites, well, the Epirots stood still. The Greeks moved a little bit, but didn't do anything. But the Samnites went next, and they sacked 3 cities and managed to pull some 15 points just on this turn's points. Now, at the end of the turn, everybody scores victory points as well. So the territories, especially the ones that the Etruscans have, are going to be worth a pile of points. The Etruscans got 3 for their attacks. Alright, on to Carthage. They still have a navy, so they get to go. Alright, I'll keep going. I lied about that Carthaginian navy. That's an Etruscan navy out there still. And no, they didn't buy it. That's from the beginning of the turn, or of the game. So we went with the Numidians, who just basically spread out and set up their defenses better for points. The Illyrians, who moved into Istria. The Cimbri, who spread out and left Pavia. And now we're up to the Romans. And the Romans are going to get basically a pile of reinforcements. They get 5 extra legions in Rome, or 1 legion in every location that they're in. Since they're only in 5 locations, they're probably better off taking the things in Rome. Their goal here is to get control of Italy again, killing some leaders, Sicily, all of North Africa, and each city in Italy. So we're going to see if they can get any reasonable points, but it's going to be a tough slog for them. Remember, ooh, I think they're due 2 more points, because the Italy, that can't go negative on them. And I remember they went negative 3 one turn. So they're actually 3 points higher than they are. So the Roman turn was a major invasion, and we haven't seen, I don't know if we've seen any of them in this game yet. They're a pretty common facet in some of the other games. Unlike the campaigns where you pay to do something, in a major invasion you just get 2 turns in a row, basically. You only get production once, but you're able to move, fight, and you have to kind of follow stacking, etc. for the most part. There are some exceptions. So the Romans managed to sweep in and grab a lot of territory that they didn't have before, but they didn't manage to get anybody to submit. And in fact, they kind of avoided doing that. They killed both the Etruscan and the Samnite leaders, which my reading of the card looks like they always get 3 points per leader if they kill a leader in a turn. But it also specifically says 3 points for each of those leaders on the end of game victory points. So my feeling is I double those points, and trust me, they need them. After summing up the points, and the big game winner here is leaving the Epirots alive. They're producing 12 points every victory point phase. Nobody's really had the power to take them out, though. Carthage didn't get the chance, and Rome probably could have earlier, but they didn't choose to. So I think this is clearly what the Epirots want to do, is rather than go challenge Rome early in the game, they want to settle themselves in Sicily and take over the Greek position there. That's a huge point value thing, and it's tough to root them out of there. I made some abortive little attempts, but you really have to go after them. And your victory points, Carthage wants to. The victory points for the, well, actually they don't so much after the Epirots show up. They really want to attack Rome then. And in this game, Rome looked like they were in the lead. Well, it turned out this was much worse. And Rome just hasn't had the opportunity. If they had wiped them out, they'd probably be doing better than if they had been trying to feather their own nest. But anyway, point-wise, at the end of this, and this is a victory point turn, next turn is the weird turn. The yellows, or no, yeah, the blues are at 84. The yellows are way up there at 162 and a quarter, and the reds are at 107. So, you know, it's pretty much over. Now, the next turn is only played by 3 Roman factions. The Optimates, the Populares, and the remainders of the Romans. And this is the Marius versus Sulla fight. Yeah, I know, Marius is dead. Marius and Sulla become the 2 factions, and the Romans have their own leader that comes up at this point as well. We'll see what that looks like in a moment. But that's going to be all campaigns. So here we are at the beginning of the 10th and final turn of Italia. And we've got a situation where we've got the Optimates down here under Sulla. And ironically, or as actually just rather well, that's where Sulla was, and his forces withdrew, but he's got a big pile there. We got Marius showing up here in Florence, and the Etruscans were able to withdraw from that. And we've got Pompeius Strabo here in Rome, and he got a couple extra troops. Now, these are going to be run as campaigns. The only players active, or the only countries active, are the 3 Roman powers, as indicated. They have cash on hand, the Romans the least. Populares have 8, Optimates have 7. All the reaction rules, etc., are in play here. So wherever the campaign ends up, there can be a reaction from it. And on top of this, Marius and Sulla have the ability to convert regular Roman troops to their side. So they can get more forces by moving into things. Now, the victory points for this, the Romans give 4 for Rome and 1 for any other city. And they also get points for killing stuff. Populares get points for killing stuff, primarily Optimates. They also get points for leaders, and a lot of points for Rome and for any city, and points for major battles, which we've seen before. As long as 3 troops on each side are there, you can get 3 points for winning that. And that's at any time, not just during their own turn, or not that they really have turns. And the Optimates have approximately the exact same values as the Populares. I'm going to play through these. I may stop and show you if anything interesting is going on, but chances are I'll just run through. So in the end, Marius takes Rome. Sulla came marching up as far as Naples, had to fight his way through. Marius just marched into Rome. He left a unit back in Florentia, and he defeated Strabo. Then Sulla attacked with all his forces. He went back to collect and then up. His movement is like 4 as a legion with a leader. And Marius was able to react with his force. And we're going to sit there. The other option would be Marius could go and try to change the loyalty or whatever of some Roman territories. But he doesn't really need to. He's well ahead and would rather just grab his 6 points for Rome along with what he's got here. So I'll calculate up final victory points, which is just from these three and what they've done, and add that to the total and see what we have. So since the guy in the lead got the most points there, 33 points for the Optimates brings them up to 195 and a quarter. 10 points, sorry, for the Populares. 10 points for the Optimates brings Blue up to 94. And 3 big points for Rome because nobody took away their northern cities. Brings them up to 110. This was a runaway game. We'll be back in a moment. Okay. I'm not smoking a pipe this time so that Clambo doesn't make fun of me. Anyway, we have, I just finished the first of 2 scenarios for Italia. The second one is a 4-player scenario. It's very much, you know, I mean, these are Britannia-based games. This one sits, at least for the rules for this one, I would say, and probably the second one as well, somewhere between Britannia and Hispania. I know they say it's derived from Hispania. The only thing that I really see that's terribly derived is the dice and the fact that things, you know, that to hit is a little bit more complex, and they got numbers on the units and stuff. But, you know, I mean, some of the, in Britannia, some of the units had different to hit numbers too. The Romans had a different value, the Knights had a different value. I think the different elements, the campaigns, the some of the combat units, the amount of different types of units, the cities, I think it makes it a slightly more complex game than Britannia. It's not quite at the level of Hispania, and not to say Hispania is a complex game. It's just I think Hispania goes beyond what most Britannia players would want. I'm not sure this is as big a stretch, and when you combine that to the really excellent components, it might be worthwhile for somebody who really likes Britannia. On the other hand, it is a little bit more gimmicky. It definitely has a different feel. I mean, every single game in this series feels fairly different to me. And I'm hoping the 2 scenarios in this feel different enough from each other in terms of style of play and flavor. I'm not sure they will, but that last turn is just such a weirdness in this. Like all of these games, this one has you kind of have to either really, really study the victory point cards or play it a few times before you know what you have to do. You know, you can't just look at your card and say, oh, I want this, oh, I want this. You got to also know what every other country on the board, especially those are your opponents, and those are the ones you're least likely to be looking at, want. 2 things on the components. One I've already mentioned, which is the player aid card. I wish they had reversed so that the setup was on. This is the setup. Yeah, the setup was on the back of the player order rather than what they've got, which is the combat information on there. It's not a terrible thing, but it is a slight annoyance. Another thing that's kind of tough. Well, first of all, for some reason I have 2 Etruscans, and I'm terrified that maybe I'm missing something from Italia too. Probably not. It's probably just an extra card in there. But all the other games Britannia and Raj. I don't know what it's called. Anyway, those two had nice cards that were a little larger than these and conveyed all the information on one side. These guys are double-sided. Notes on the back are fine. That's kind of like what Hispania has. But some of these suckers have important information on the turns on the back. And it's tougher to keep track of things. Some of them will be split so that your at any time victory points are both on, they start on the front and then they continue on the back. And it's just, it's something you got to get used to, I guess, and know to look for them or whatever. But on our first playing, it was kind of difficult. But otherwise, I mean, the components are fantastic. I, of course, have a gripe about, full color rules with kind of shiny paper and pictures and such. But they weren't that bad. It's not that complex a game. It is definitely a little lighter than Hispania. Hispania has, charts to indicate, oh, I'm a this type of unit against a this type of unit. I need to roll a 7 against that or a 4 against this. And there's just so many modifiers for terrain, for this, that, and the other, and those modifiers are based on the type of unit. That I've always been afraid to bring that game to other people, not because they wouldn't be able to handle it. The group I was with handled more complicated games, but more because, hey, look, this is a Britannia-like game. It just shouldn't be that complicated. And it really isn't overall. It's just annoyingly so. It's not like there's, a really complicated rule set. It's just there's all these little annoying things you got to look up and find, and there's some physical problems with the components as well. Being an AWE game, of course, and the rules, of course, are entirely unclear, and the victory conditions are skewed. I'm not sure how balanced this one is. I feel like it probably should be among people who know what they're doing. There doesn't seem like there's a tremendous hose factor in here like there is in Hispania. But these games generally tend not to be perfectly balanced. I know Britannia, when it's played at WBC, they bid on the powers. Now, for me, it's shocking because the bids that they make are in the 1 to 4 range. And as far as I'm concerned, we're talking, there's like a level, there are colors that I feel are a good 10, 20 points below, which I think is a huge difference. But my experiences with those tend to be very different from what people brought back to me as stories from the con. But my experiences include playing against these people who brought stories back. Anyway, someday I'll get Britannia on the table. I don't know if I've got it up here, but then we'll talk about that more.